But, honey, love isn't enough if it's not returned the same way. I reached across the table, covering her hands with mine. I've seen his type before. They start with small acts of disrespect and build from there. Tonight was a test to see how much I'd tolerate, and how much you'd excuse. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at our joined hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I saw how he looked at you. That wasn't nervousness, was it? No, sweetheart, it wasn't. He's never talked to me that way, she said quickly, as if defending him could make the evening's events disappear. He's always been sweet and attentive. I'm sure he has been. You're beautiful, successful, kind, everything a man like him wants to acquire. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. But acquisition isn't love, Vivian. Love means cherishing what someone values, not dismissing it. Tears gathered in her eyes. What if you're right? What if I've made a terrible mistake? The question broke my heart. Then you figure out what to do next, I said simply. And you remember that whatever happens, you're not alone. You have people who love you for exactly who you are. People who would never ask you to be ashamed of where you come from. She wiped her eyes with the cloth napkin, leaving small dark spots on the expensive fabric. I thought I was so smart, so independent. How did I not see this? Because you have a good heart, and you believe the best in people. Don't ever let anyone make you think that's a weakness. I squeezed her hands. You deserve someone who honors what you value, not someone who sees your love as a step up his social ladder. Through the alcove's glass partition, I could see Jasper still at our table, now speaking animatedly on his phone. His body language was relaxed, confident, a man who believed he'd won an important victory. I keep thinking about the way he talked about our neighborhood, Vivian said slowly, like it was something embarrassing instead of home. Your mother and I chose that neighborhood because it was full of good people who looked out for each other. You grew up surrounded by teachers and firefighters and shop owners who knew your name and watched you grow up. That's not something to be ashamed of. I know, she said, but her voice was uncertain. Do you? Because the way he talked tonight, you'd think honest work was something to be hidden, like the hands that built your treehouse and taught you to change a tire were somehow shameful. She looked back toward Jasper, who had finished his call and was now checking his watch with obvious impatience. He's probably wondering what's taking so long. Let him wonder. I kept my voice steady, though part of me wanted to march back to that table and explain a few things about respect. This conversation is about you, not him. What should I do, Dad? The question I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. Only you can answer that, I said. But I can tell you this, a man who truly loves you would never try to separate you from the people who matter to you. Love doesn't make demands like that. She cried quietly against my shoulder while afternoon light streamed through her windows. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You don't have to decide everything today, but remember, whatever you choose, I'll be here. Our door is always open, and our love for you never changes. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes red but clearer than they'd been in weeks. I love you, Dad, so much. I know, Princess. I know. We sat together as the afternoon light faded. I arrived at the airport, my heart pounding with the anticipation of traveling with my daughter, dreaming of family reconciliation and the warm sand of Florida. But there was no one there. I called her. Oh, your flight was supposed to be yesterday. I think you're late. Laughter on the other end of the line, a betrayal from my own flesh and blood. So, I made one call. And then she had 87 missed calls and her trip ended behind bars. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know what time it is where you are now in the comments. I was stirring the pasta sauce when the knock came. Sharp, impatient, 3 quick raps that made me jump. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and crossed the small living room, my slippers shuffling against the worn hardwood floor. Through the peephole, I saw Joanna's face tight with an emotion I couldn't quite read. Buford loomed behind her, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "Joanna, sweetheart," I said, opening the door wide. "What a surprise! Come in, please." She brushed past without meeting my eyes, her designer bag swinging from her shoulder. Buford followed, tracking snow onto my entrance mat. He didn't bother with a greeting. "Dad, we need to talk." Joanna's voice had that clipped quality I'd learned to dread over the past year. She dropped her bag onto my kitchen table with a thud that rattled the salt shaker. "Of course. Let me turn down the stove. Can I get you some tea? Coffee?" "We're not here for refreshments." Buford settled into my chair, the one with the cushion molded to my back, and stretched his legs out as if he owned the place. A smirk played at the corner of his mouth. I turned off the burner and faced them, my stomach tightening. Joanna was already pulling receipts from her bag, fanning them across the table like evidence at a trial. "Look at these, Dad. Just look." Her finger jabbed at the numbers. "Mortgage, insurance, property taxes. It's crushing us. The house I gave you has those expenses." "Yes, all homes do. But you own it outright, Joanna. No rent, no landlord." "That's not enough anymore," she cut me off, her eyes hard. "You don't understand how expensive everything is. Buford's consulting business had a slow quarter, and we've got obligations. Real obligations." I moved closer to the table, trying to keep my voice steady. "I gave you the house I built with your mother. Every penny I saved went into that property. What more can I? What more?" Buford leaned forward, his tone mocking. "You're sitting in this cozy little apartment with a pension and investments, playing the martyr. Meanwhile, we're scraping by month to month. You've got resources, old man. Time to step up." The word old landed like a slap. I felt heat crawling up my neck. "How dare you speak to me that way? I worked 40 years to provide for my family. That house was my retirement security, and I gave it to you both because Joanna is my daughter and I wanted her to have stability. I won't be talked to like some mistake in my own home." Joanna stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "See? This is exactly what Buford said would happen. You get defensive instead of helpful. We need money, Dad, not lectures about your sacrifices." I reached for the folder I kept on my bookshelf, the one with all the property transfer documents. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out the deed copy. "Look at this. I signed over a house worth $400,000. $400,000. And you're calling me stingy." She snatched the paper from my hand, her face flushed. For a moment, she just stared at it. Then she ripped it clean in half. "You think paperwork impresses me? You think this makes up for not helping when we actually need it?" The sound of ripping paper seemed to echo in my tiny kitchen. I stood frozen, watching the pieces flutter to the floor. "Get out." My voice came out hoarse. "Both of you. Now." Buford rose slowly, that infuriating smile still in place. "Come on, babe. Let the old guy cool off. He'll come around when he realizes we're serious." They left without another word. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the framed photo of Joanna's college graduation on my wall. I sank into the chair Buford had vacated, still warm from his body, and stared at the torn document on my floor. My daughter's face, twisted with anger and entitlement, kept replaying in my mind. When had she become this person? When had I become disposable? The pasta sauce had gone cold on the stove. I didn't bother reheating it. The next 5 days crawled by in a haze of unanswered calls and restless nights. I kept replaying the argument, searching for the moment I could have said something different, something that would have reached her. But every time I picked up my phone to call Joanna, I set it back down. What would I even say? On the morning of January 20th, I forced myself out for my usual run through Lincoln Park. The cold bit at my face, and patches of ice made the path treacherous, but I needed to move. I needed to feel something other than this hollow ache in my chest. I was halfway around the loop when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. A text from Margaret, my former colleague from the real estate firm. Her message was short. Cornelius, are you okay? Saw something concerning online. Call me when you can. I stopped mid-stride, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. My fingers fumbled with the screen as I opened my messaging app and typed back, "What did you see?" Her response came quickly. "Check your daughter's social media. I'm sorry you had to find out this way." My chest constricted. I turned and walked briskly back toward my apartment, my running shoes crunching through the snow. The 15-minute walk felt endless. Once inside, I shook off my jacket and went straight to my computer, an old desktop that took forever to boot up. My hands trembled as I typed Joanna's name into the search bar. There it was. Posted 2 days ago. A photo of the house, the beautiful brick colonial with the maple tree in front that I'd planted when Joanna was 6. The caption read, "When your dad gives you a generous gift but acts like Scrooge when you actually need help. #familydrama #stingyoldman." 43 likes, 18 comments, most from people I didn't recognize, making jokes about boomer entitlement and holding on to every penny. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. She'd put our private conflict on display for strangers to mock. My own daughter. I dialed her number before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the 4th ring. "Dad, what? Why would you post that, Joanna? Why air our family business to the entire world?" "Oh, God." I heard rustling like she was shifting position. "It's social media, Dad. Everyone vents online. Don't make it a bigger deal than it is." "A bigger deal? You called me a stingy old man in front of hundreds of people. It was a joke. You're being dramatic as usual. Look, I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. Can we not do this right now?" My throat tightened. "This hurts me, Joanna, deeply. Whatever issues we have, we should resolve them privately, not through public humiliation. You always make everything about your feelings." Her voice had gone flat, detached. "Maybe if you actually helped instead of playing the victim, I wouldn't need to vent." "Joanna," the line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I set the phone down carefully on my desk and stared at the screen, at my daughter's smiling profile picture. That photo was from last Christmas, taken in my living room. She'd been laughing at something Buford said, her eyes bright. Had she already overlooked me then? Had every smile been a lie? The apartment felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in. I needed air, but I'd just been outside. I needed answers, but Joanna clearly wouldn't give them. All I had was this knowing certainty that something fundamental had broken between us, and I didn't know how to fix it, or if it could even be fixed. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to lose myself in routine, morning runs, afternoon chess games at the community center, evening documentaries. But Joanna's words echoed in every quiet moment. "You always make everything about your feelings," as if my feelings didn't matter, as if I was just an obstacle to her comfort. On the evening of February 5th, I skipped the community center and stayed home. I set up my personal chess set, the wooden one with hand-carved pieces that my father had given me 50 years ago. I didn't have an opponent, but I played both sides anyway, moving the pieces slowly while my mind wandered to Buford. This all traces back to Buford. I remembered meeting him at the engagement party 3 years ago. Joanna had been radiant, introducing her fiancé with obvious pride. Buford had given me a firm handshake and an appraising look, the kind real estate agents give a property before deciding if it's worth their time. "So, you're the legendary Cornelius," he'd said. "Joanna tells me you quite built the empire in Chicago real estate." "I did well enough," I'd replied modestly. "Enough to retire comfortably and leave something for my daughter." His eyes had sharpened there. "Smart man. Family legacy is everything." At the time, I'd thought he appreciated family values. Now I understood he'd been calculating my net worth. I moved a black knight, capturing my own white bishop. In chess, you had to think several moves ahead. Anticipate your opponent's strategy. I hadn't done that with Buford. I'd been too happy that Joanna seemed happy, too relieved she'd found someone after her divorce. I hadn't looked closer at the man behind the charm. I replayed them all, the engagement party, the wedding, those first family dinners. The turning point came about 18 months ago. Buford had mentioned his consulting firm was expanding. He'd asked my opinion on leveraging property for business capital. I'd advised caution, suggesting he build the business slowly without taking on dangerous debt. He'd smiled and nodded, but his eyes had gone cold. Conservative approach. That's one way to do it. After that, Joanna started pulling away. Fewer calls, shorter visits, and when we did talk, there was always an edge to her voice, an impatience that hadn't been there before, like I was wasting her time. A knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I checked the clock, 8:30 p.m., too late for social calls. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty except for an envelope on my doormat. No postage, just my name written in Joanna's looping handwriting. I brought it inside and tore it open. A single sheet of paper with a bulleted list. "Dad, since you won't answer my calls, here's what we need. $15,000 for roof repairs. Your gift house has issues. $8,000 to cover Buford's business expenses this quarter. $5,000 for upcoming property taxes. Total, $28,000. We need this by March 1st. If you really care about me, you'll help. J. $28,000. Demanded like I was an ATM. No please. No acknowledgement of what I'd already sacrificed. Just entitlement and a deadline. I crumpled the letter in my fist and walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling again, coating the street in fresh white. Somewhere out there, my daughter was living in the house I'd built, sleeping in rooms I'd painted, walking on floors I'd refinished. And she thought I was her enemy. No, not her enemy. Buford's enemy. And somehow, he'd convinced her I was the villain in this story. I smoothed out the letter and read it again. The phrasing, the tone, it didn't sound like Joanna. It sounded like someone else's words coming out of her mouth, poison spreading through her thoughts. I returned to my chess set and studied the board. Sometimes in chess, you had to sacrifice a piece to win the game. You had to let your opponent think they were winning, right up until the moment you trapped their king. I wasn't ready to give up on my daughter, but I also wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore. The next 2 weeks blurred into a strange routine. I ran my morning loops through Lincoln Park, made small talk with neighbors, and watched documentaries. I didn't call Joanna. She didn't call me. The silence between us felt like a living thing, growing heavier every day. On the morning of February 20th, I was at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and reading the Tribune, when my phone rang. Joanna's name flashed on the screen. My hand hesitated over the phone. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to protect myself from whatever fresh wound she might inflict, but she was still my daughter. "Hello, sweetheart." "Hey, Dad." Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. The shift was so jarring I nearly dropped the phone. "Listen, I've been thinking. Things got pretty heated last time, and I hate how we left things. So, here's what I want to propose. A family trip. Florida, late May. You, me, Buford, and his parents. A week at the beach, nice resort. Time to reconnect as a family. I sat very still, processing. Florida, South Beach, specifically. I've already looked at hotels. There's this gorgeous place right on the ocean. Buford found a great deal. We'd fly out together, all of us. Make it a proper vacation. What do you say? She paused. I know we've had our issues, Dad. But family is family, right? We should try to move past this. Family is family. The words twisted something in my chest. I wanted so badly to believe her. When exactly in May? I asked carefully. Probably around the 20th. We're still finalizing dates, but I wanted to run it by you first. Make sure you're available. She paused. I know we've had our issues, Dad. But family is family, right? We should try to move past this. That sounds nice, Joanna. Really nice. Count me in. Perfect. I'll send you all the details once we book everything, flight info, hotel, the whole package. This will be good for us, Dad. A fresh start. After we hung up, I sat staring at my coffee. The newspaper lay forgotten. A trip to Florida, with Joanna, Buford, and his parents. The idea of the Florida trip filled me with equal parts hope and dread. Ambrose and Harriet Bradley. I'd met them exactly 3 times, and each encounter had left a sour taste. But maybe in a neutral setting, away from Chicago, away from the financial pressures, we could find our way back to each other. I pulled my wall calendar down and marked May 20th with a circle, my hand steadier than it had been in weeks. One chance. That's all I wanted. One chance to reconnect with my daughter before it was too late. 5 days later, I found myself in a downtown cafe I used to frequent with colleagues years ago. The place hadn't changed much. Same exposed brick walls, same mismatched furniture, same smell of roasted coffee beans that hit you the moment you walked in. I'd needed to get out of the apartment, away from my own thoughts. I ordered a black coffee and claimed a table by the window. I thought about Ambrose and Harriet Bradley. The first time I'd met them was at the engagement party. Ambrose had given me a firm handshake and an appraising look, as if calculating my net worth with his eyes. Within 10 minutes of conversation, he'd made 3 separate comments about people from modest backgrounds and knowing one's place. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. The second meeting, at the wedding rehearsal dinner, eliminated any doubt. Harriet had cornered me by the bar and spent 20 minutes explaining in excruciating detail how their family maintained certain standards and how important it was that Joanna not slip backward financially. The implication was clear: I was the backward slip, the anchor around their son's prospects. But it was the third encounter, a stilted dinner at their home in Evanston 6 months after the wedding, that solidified my understanding. Ambrose had held court at the head of his mahogany dining table. "You were in real estate, weren't you, Cornelius?" he'd said, swirling brandy in an oversized glass. Must have been quite the adjustment, going from broker to, well, to retirement. The pause before retirement had been deliberate, loaded with condescension. "I did well enough to retire comfortably," I'd replied evenly. That was always the goal. Of course, though one wonders about planning legacy, making sure the next generation has proper resources, not just adequate ones. Buford had smirked into his wine glass. Joanna had looked at her plate. Now, sitting in this cafe, I wondered what spending a week with Ambrose and Harriet would be like. Maybe the trip would give me a chance to observe them more closely, to understand what kind of people had raised Buford. Maybe I'd see some crack in their facade that would help me understand what my daughter had gotten herself into. I took a long sip of coffee. Sometimes observation was enough. April arrived with the kind of warmth that made Chicagoans forget winter entirely. I spent the morning at a department store on Michigan Avenue, methodically selecting clothes for Florida, lightweight shirts, khaki shorts, a new pair of sandals. Back at my apartment, I spread everything out on my bed. I was folding the shirts into my suitcase when my phone rang. Buford's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Cornelius. Just wanted to touch base about the trip." His voice carried that false heartiness he used when pretending to be friendly. "Got your flight info?" "Yeah. May 20th, United Flight 842, departing O'Hare at 2 p.m. Joanna sent me the details last week." "Great, great. Just making sure everything's squared away. Wouldn't want any confusion." He paused, and I heard ice clinking in a glass. "Few tips for you, old man. Remember to bring your medications." "Yeah, high blood pressure and all that. Humidity in Florida can be tough on folks your age. Maybe pack some extra heart pills, just in case." The condescension dripped from every word. "I've traveled plenty, Buford. I'll manage just fine." "Sure you will. Sure you will. Just looking out for my father-in-law." The way he said it made the relationship sound like a burden. "Anyway, we're all excited. Going to be a great week. Quality family bonding and all that." "I'm looking forward to it," I lied. "Yeah. Well, see you at the airport. Don't be late. You know how security lines are these days. Might want to get there extra early considering." He trailed off deliberately, letting the implication hang. "I'll be there on time," I said flatly. He chuckled. "Of course you will. All right. Got to run. Catch you on the 20th. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, staring at my half-packed suitcase. Each item went in with deliberate precision. I would be prepared. I would be punctual. I would be everything they thought I wasn't. The morning of May 15th arrived clear and warm. I'd barely slept. By 7 a.m., I was dressed and ready, my packed suitcase standing by the door. At 9:30, I called a taxi for the 40-minute drive to O'Hare. My phone showed 10:42 a.m. when we pulled up to Terminal 1, United Departures. I made my way to the departure board, scanning the listings for United 842 to Miami. 2 p.m. departure. Nothing. I checked again. No Miami at 2 p.m. No flight 842. My chest tightened. I rolled my suitcase to the United counter. I waited, watching the clock tick. Finally, a young woman turned to me with a professional smile. I pulled out my printed confirmation and slid it across the counter. "I'm looking for my flight. United 842 to Miami. Departing at 2 p.m., but it's not on the board." She scanned the paper, her smile fading. "Sir, this flight, it departed yesterday, May 14th at 2 p.m. Yesterday? That's impossible. My daughter specifically told me May 15th. I have the date right here." I tapped the confirmation. She leaned closer to her screen. "I see the booking here, but the actual flight date was the 14th. This ticket shows you were checked in as a no-show yesterday." Her tone shifted to something like pity. "I'm sorry, sir, but you missed your flight." I stood there with my printed confirmation, proof of nothing, and felt the first cold fingers of realization creeping up my spine. "Check again," I said quietly. "Please." "Same result, I'm afraid." "Is there someone you can call?" "Family traveling with you." I stepped away from the counter, pulling my phone from my jacket pocket with hands that felt disconnected from my body. I found Joanna's number and pressed call. It rang 4 times, then she picked up. "Dad, hey." Her voice was bright, almost singing. Too bright. In the background, I heard other voices. Laughter. The distant crash of waves. "Joanna, I'm at O'Hare. The flight. They're saying it left yesterday." "That can't be right. I have May 15th written down." "You told me." "Oh." A pause, stretching out like taffy, then with an airiness that made my stomach drop. "Oops. Your flight was yesterday, wasn't it? Looks like you missed it." "Oops." As if I'd forgotten to pick up milk. "What?" I couldn't form more words. "Yeah, we're already here. Got in last night, actually. The beach is gorgeous, Dad. You should see it." She wasn't even trying to sound sorry. There was movement on her end. Muffled sounds and then laughter. Male laughter. Unmistakable. Buford's voice. Slightly drunk already, did the old-timer really fall for it? More laughter, deeper, rougher, Ambrose, and a woman's titter that could only be Harriet. "Joanna." My voice came out hoarse. "Are you telling me you gave me the wrong date on purpose?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Dad." Now her tone shifted to something angry, defensive. "It was just a mix-up. These things happen. Maybe you should have double-checked your dates. You know how forgetful you can get at your age." In the background, Buford again. "Tell him we're having cocktails on the beach. Tell him about the view." She giggled. "Look, we've got to go. Pool bar's calling. Sorry about the confusion, okay? Maybe next time pay more attention to your ticket." "Joanna, wait." The line went dead. I stood there in the middle of Terminal 1 with my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. I lowered my phone slowly and looked at the screen. My daughter's contact photo smiled up at me. My suitcase stood beside me, packed with clothes for a trip I'd never take. The hope I'd carefully folded between each shirt had been for nothing. The realization settled over me like cold water. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, calculated, a game they'd planned and executed while I'd spent weeks looking forward to reconciliation. They had laughed, all of them together, while I stood alone in an airport holding a useless ticket. I gripped my suitcase handle and started walking toward the exit. The taxi ride home passed in silence. I sat in the back seat, watching Chicago slide by. We pulled up to my building at 12:37 p.m. "Change of plans," I said to Mrs. Chen from 4B, unlocking my door. Inside my apartment, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. The apartment was ready for a man to leave on a trip, but I was back, and I finally knew where I stood. I knew their game. Cornelius should execute the plan he was evidently preparing for, legal action to protect his assets and initiate criminal charges based on the evidence of premeditated financial fraud and elder abuse. This situation is past the point of reconciliation. It is a calculated act of malice and fraud involving his daughter and her in-laws. His next moves must be decisive and legally grounded. Cornelius's actions demonstrate he was playing a long game, waiting for his family to commit a clear, documented act of malice. He must contact his lawyer, Cleo Andrews, whom he already trusts from a previous complex real estate case. This is no longer a family dispute, it is a case of premeditated financial fraud, wire fraud, using the email and falsified flight info, and elder abuse. Cornelius has meticulously gathered compelling evidence. The photo of the laptop screen showing Buford's email to his parents about the false flight date is crucial evidence of premeditation and conspiracy to commit fraud and emotional harm. Proof that Joanna used the gifted house to take out loans without his knowledge, possibly using forged cosigner documents, if he was still a cosigner, is evidence of loan fraud and theft by deception. This report detailing Buford's gambling debts, Ambrose's past ethical violations, and Harriet's issues provides crucial context on the pattern of financial misconduct and their motivation. He must authorize Cleo to turn over all evidence to the state attorney's office and relevant federal agencies, like the FBI or SEC, given the interstate nature and Buford's business, to pursue charges for fraud and elder financial abuse. This is the most powerful leverage to ensure consequences. He needs to file an immediate civil suit to reverse the fraudulent refinancing and regain full, clear title to the house. The evidence of premeditated fraud and forgery, if confirmed, will ensure the loans are voided, protecting the asset he worked 40 years to secure. Cornelius realized he couldn't win by being patient or forgiving. He played his part in their cruel little theater because he needed them to feel safe enough to execute their plan and create evidence of their malicious intent. By waiting until they were all physically out of state and gloating over their deception, he ensured two things. The email and the phone call laughter are irrefutable proof that this was not a mistake, but a planned humiliation and financial distraction. The plot involved crossing state lines, Illinois to Florida, and involved potentially illegal refinancing and wire fraud, which brings in powerful federal enforcement agencies that take elder financial abuse extremely seriously. He has sacrificed the immediate hope of reconciliation for the long-term protection of his security and dignity. His next action is to ensure they face the real consequences they earned. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.